All right, welcome to the Awaken Beauty podcast. I am Cassandra, your organic beauty, positive mind management, and biofeedback practitioner. And today we have a very interesting conversation, and it's going to be a good one, and it affects everybody. Today we're going to have a fascinating discussion on how we all intuitively just kind of know that each of us are being tracked at some layer and level. And today's discussion is one of safety, personal privacy, security, and how there's a complete industry protecting our civil liberties in the digital world today. While our cell phones are a powerful tool for saving photos and videos, they also contain a trove of personal data, including contacts, location, message history, emails, and private login information. Now capture this. Each of our lives are stored on our digital devices, literally. And to that point, today's wonderful guest is Todd Ariss, the owner of GoDark Faraday. And Todd has a traveling company, and he then learned early on from many business travelers that they were really concerned about being tracked while traveling abroad. So a little bit about Todd. Now, Todd Ariss is the co-founder of Terrace Travel Gear and the newest research and development division of GoDark Faraday bags. The GoDark Faraday bag journey has been a long journey tracking back to his early days as a physicist at the Cross Cancer Institute, followed by the joint project between the Center for Subatomic Research and CERN, the Center for Nuclear Research. Now, if that doesn't make somebody sound really smart, I don't know what does. And in 2014, Todd created Terrace Travel Gear so he could scratch and itch. And after introducing the Jetsetter Digital Luggage Scale, one of the most popular and recognized luggage scales on the market, he ventured back to his first interest of signal blocking from his work as a physicist, which ultimately led to the development of the new GoDark Faraday bag line of products today. And from there, I will absolutely let Todd tell his story. Todd, thank you so much for joining us on the Awaken Beauty podcast. And this is just a prime opportunity to discuss this very topic because everybody is affected and you have, really such an interesting story. And so I think there's a lot that people can kind of put in the light of fear around data mining and this whole topic, but it's really so much broader than that. And I really wanted to bring you on the show and talk about the science, what people should look for so they're not, hacked themselves as far as their checkbook, and, a little bit more how we can learn about this kind of new data out there and how we can protect ourselves as civil liberties.
Hi, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's wonderful to be here. And you're absolutely right. Privacy is a big issue, and it's a much broader issue than most people realize. When we began this whole process of building privacy products, it was something that, as you mentioned, we got to it from a roundabout way. And in some ways, I feel like maybe that's where we should have started. With our businesses. But we discovered, travelers were reporting to us that they were having concerns, mostly traveling over to Asia. They were finding that they were being tracked a lot. Now, we understand that intuitively. We hear all the time that we're always being tracked. But a lot of business executives were having particular concerns about it because they thought it was potentially going to affect their businesses, and as well as the hacking that was happening. Many of them reported to us that their cell phones would begin to have hacking attempts made against them before they even got out of the airport.
Wow.
And, when they landed. And airports are actually quite a common place for that sort of thing. So that's how we kind of got to it. We thought, what, we care about privacy. We want to do something about it. So we went from that concern among our travel customers into saying, what, let's do something about this. Let's see how we can try and fix this problem. And we started on that process about 2.5 years ago, working on this product.
And I really look at, the travel industry. I've got a lot of friends that are turnaround specialists and do a lot in that kind of industry. And, when we think about travel, those of us that don't travel a lot, when I am traveling, I often see these men and women that are, it's just like second nature to them. They're on the plane, off the train, traveling to China, back, gone for months at a time. And not only is it a personal safety issue, but there's also a corporate issue there as well. I've got a couple of friends that are in security, and I don't really think people understand how big of a business hacking really is. I mean, I kind of like explaining it where it's an industry, right? So there are like globally an industry where people literally have what we would equate to 401ks based on a hacking business where, I mean, it is just nonstop. Every single nick and cranny of how these companies can hack into your data and your information. So not only is it a personal issue, it really truly is a corporate issue as well, as far as data that they're carrying on that device or their phone or computer at that mark.
Absolutely. And when you think about the way we use our phones, especially in a business context, most executives have their cell phones connected to their back office software in some way. So if
Right.
you were to get into somebody's cell phone, you might be able to get into their Google email or their Drive or their, whatever kind of back office system they're using. Quite often, breaching somebody's cell phone is just a gateway into their whole corporate network. And
Mm-hmm.
we tend to not realize how open we are. I'm sure that most people right now have their cell phones and their emails and everything all hooked up. We think when we lose our cell phone that we've lost a valuable piece of hardware, but what we've really lost is potentially somebody gaining access to all of the different software that we have connected on our cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big problem for corporations around the world lose hundreds of millions of dollars to that problem every year.
Absolutely. Not only lose it, but they spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on protecting their data each year.
Yes.
Crazy. So, I just kind of wanted to open that up because we all like to be very narrowed on it's the Google that's, creeping us out, but it's much bigger, and it is an absolute business. And there's a lot of money behind data, and so that's just it's an issue that I wanted to tackle. And so you went from the businesses and any market or any good entrepreneur, in which you truly are. And after I've had a couple discussions with you, you just have a really awesome background. Is they're problem solvers, and so you kind of went in and let's talk about some of the other market value that you bring, which kind of surprised you based on people wanting safety and security. And then we can kind of go into, well, what is the Faraday bag? How do you use them, and how does it protect us on a personal level? But I think this other part is really, really valid too. So
Sure. It's interesting because we started off thinking about business travelers, but once we actually produced the bag, got the bag onto the market, we discovered that 90% of the people buying the bag weren't business travelers. Not that the business travelers weren't interested, but that the bag had such a broad appeal, the market was just significantly bigger than we realized. Some of the earliest purchases that we started to get in large numbers were from journalists. Journalists were particularly concerned about trying to protect their sources because they realized that one easy way to determine somebody's source is to just look at all of the cell phones that are close to them. So what they'll do is they can look at your cell phone and your location, and they look at the history over the past, say, 2 months, and they look to see what other cell phones were you close to more than one occasion. So if your cell phone was within 20 feet of somebody else's cell phone on 5 occasions over the past month, there's a good chance you know each other. Maybe you just hang out at the coffee shop at the same time by coincidence, but it narrows down the ability to figure out who your friends are, whether you're actually messaging with them in any way or not, just your physical location.
Wow.
And Glenn Greenwald, who broke the Snowden case several years back, he's reported on that issue quite a few times, saying that it's a concern for us as journalists.
Wow.
And there's an organization called the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, and their whole job, it's a nonprofit, is helping to protect journalists, and it's one of the big problems that they have as well. So journalist was an early one that we hadn't really thought of again. And then the other one that came out was law enforcement and military. We hadn't really thought about them because, to be honest, when we first brought out this product, we realized a lot of the spying and the privacy issues are being perpetrated by law enforcement and military and
Right.
intelligence agencies. So how do we market a product when those groups might really dislike it? We don't want to end up on the wrong side of people that can cause problems for us. So we thought this might be an issue, and it turns out they're some of our best customers.
Wow.
Because the military doesn't want to send their soldiers off somewhere where their cell phones are broadcasting their locations continuously. And law enforcement, when they arrest somebody, they want to take that cell phone and preserve it as evidence so it can't be remotely accessed and wiped. So the first thing they do is they drop it in a GoDark bag. It protects anybody from remotely accessing the device. So those were some that we didn't see coming.
So one thing that I thought was really, really interesting on that part is, law enforcement, when they're utilizing the GoDark Faraday bag, is that, let's say you have, let's just say a criminal, okay, whatever degree that is, they are able to capture that person, and they drop the phone into the bag, right here. Drop the phone into the bag because, one thing that can happen is that, if they're highly intelligent on how they are orchestrating something, somebody can access their phone from, a third party or what have you, and then wipe out their phone. And so they can lose, the military or, cops or whoever that is, then lose all their data because somebody has gone in and taken off all of their data. And so they lose all of that credible data, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's how they save the data, because you can't penetrate and you can't escape the Faraday bag. So it's kind of it's a component that just kind of snapshots everything in its time, and it isn't able to penetrate the bag. So is that correct?
Yeah, that's about it. It just, if you can't send a signal to your phone to tell it, hey, go and delete everything, if your phone can't receive that signal in any way, it isn't going to do it. So it just sits there thinking that you're sitting there waiting to use your phone. It doesn't realize there's any issue.
Yep. I think that's really, really interesting. That's great. So we talked about, the military, obviously they want to be protected because, let alone, I've got lots of friends with kids in the military, and it's all hush, like they can't say anything, let alone their data getting hacked and where they're at, obviously another issue, especially if they're on a special ops. So is there anything else that kind of surprised you between the military, and we talked about journalists and white crimes? Anything else that comes to mind before we talk about just kind of the general consumer and how they can use this bag and technology?
Yeah, there is one other group. There's a lot of groups.
Yeah.
One other group in particular I want to point out are activists. And the reason I want to point them out is it illustrates a case that, again, also goes beyond activists. There are devices out there called IMS eye catchers. And an IMS eye catcher, you might also have heard the term called a stingray device.
Yeah.
A stingray device is a brand of IMS eye catcher. It's made by an Israeli company, but there are many other IMS eye catchers out there. Essentially, what it is it fits in about the size of a small suitcase or briefcase, and it's like a fake cell phone tower. So when somebody brings that device into a location and turns it on, what happens is everybody's cell phones within a certain area, it might be 100 meters, something like that, will reroute through that cell phone case, through the IMS eye catcher, not cell phone case, the IMS eye catcher device. So everybody's phones, you make your phone calls, or maybe you're doing nothing, but even when you're not using your phone, it's just sitting there, but it's on. It's constantly sending signals to towers in its area to say, here I am. Well, what happens is this device, the IMS eye catcher, it causes everyone's phones to route through that device, which then passes it on to a regular cell phone tower. So it intercepts everything going through. And so what law enforcement have been doing over the last few years now, they've been doing it illegally. They're supposed to be having warrants. It's been being fought out in the Supreme Court for some time now. What they've been doing is they will roll up to any crowd or gathering, turn the device on, and it instantly builds a list of everybody available in that crowd. So it looks at all the cell phones, gives them a list, and they know instantly all the names of everybody in a crowd.
Wow.
So now your ability to go and peacefully protest an issue or go to a political rally or whatever it is you want to do, it's a peaceful protest. You should have the right to do privately.
Right.
But now they can instantly push a button and build a list of everybody at that gathering. And, the fear is that that information or that power to do that is going to get abused. We see so much politics in law enforcement nowadays that the abuse potential is massive, and it is being abused. We've got numerous examples of it, which is why it's always being fought out in court. So now you take your activists and they're at a rally saying, hey, whether it's a political rally or a protest or whether it's a climate issue or whatever their issue is, now they have a fear of becoming part of some list at some law enforcement agency that could be either profiled, discriminated against, or whatever. So what we did is we started seeing a lot of activists buy the bag. And one of the reasons they chose our bag over other bags, for instance, was that the inside of actually every other bag we looked at, I'm sure there are some that aren't in this case, but all the ones we looked at, the actual blocking fabric, and we can get into it later a bit more about how the bag works, but there's a blocking fabric that does all the magic, but it has a lot of metal in it. And without an inner liner to the bag, that metal fabric will touch the screen on your phone and it'll activate apps, and it's just like you're pushing your finger all over the place.
Right, right.
And so it forced everyone to turn their phone off.
Yep.
Because even if you turn your screen off, a lot of screens still have these gesture things activated.
Yep.
So then they would have to turn their phone off, and then partly it defeats the purpose of the bag, but it also means that they don't have quick access to safety or their camera when they want it. And that was a really big issue for journalists or activists, because they wanted to be able to pull their phone out and take pictures if there was an emergency. Or so having their phone powered down was a safety concern for them. So we put a liner inside of our bag to protect that material from touching your screen. And because of that, I think it's probably why we get a large portion of activists. Yeah, you can see on that there, the top part is the metallic blocking material in the roll top portion. But once you get down past the roll top section, then there's a felt liner to protect your screen.
Yeah, I can see that. That's interesting. It's kind of a common sense piece for me if I were to think about how to construct the bag. I mean, obviously, just the phone being in your pocket, you're constantly butt dialing people. You certainly can do the same thing in a Faraday bag.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry, I'm butt dialing you from my bag that's just not working, and I got it from Amazon for $20. But it's all good. I thought I was being censored, but it's all good.
That's right. And so, we actually learned something interesting about this. So activists started buying the bag for that reason. They felt safer by having their phone on still. But we've had several customers call us back and tell us, hey, we really love the bag. I'm a lady that works a night shift, and I'm in kind of a sketchy part of town. And when I walk home from work at night, I still want my privacy, but I don't like my phone being off because there's a safety issue.
You bet.
And, so we've heard a lot of that sort of thing too. So we're just finding different ways that people are using it that wasn't part of our original thinking when we developed the bag. So it's kind of exciting for us actually to see all the different use cases.
Yeah. So I'll tell you kind of how I came to Faraday is, in the time of recording this, and this is why I really wanted to get you on, Todd, is COVID-19 and the Corona. And, specifically, I've always had my grocery shop for me. I've been inside my apartment for like 3 days straight or 3 weeks straight, but it really did affect me on knowing that I had clues that people were following me based on information that was shared with me. And that really hit me at my core as someone who just lost their business has no clients, has no ways and means to even be able to reach out to my clients and physically be really, truly able to serve them. Even communicating with them on my phone feels very eerie to me. Now, I am one that does tend to really look at the covert and overt things in life. So I'm not naive, and I know the depths of darkness. And I'm not here to be a conspiracy theorist, nor are you. But each and every one of us know that all the devices in our homes, including our phones, have a direct portal to our personal life. And so when I learned that there were people following me on my phone, and I'm not talking about my friends, it really, really triggered me on a personal level. And I got angry. And I really feel that this is a global shift that's going on right now. And people are really learning, really, truly, what kind of control they have over them. And I've always said that this current structure right now is, yes, a virus. And I'm not going to get into the woo woo of like the earth is cleansing itself, because God bless China, I've needed some fresh air. But this really is an economic warfare. And this really is a top-down warfare. And if we really look at it in the broadest spectrum, even in the midst of it, we still have rights. And we also have to learn what our rights are. And then we also have to learn on how people expose us to items that are not truly what they say they are, out of the midst of trying to grab something out of feeling unsafe, triggered, and emotional about it. And so that's why I think it's really important to then kind of shift into this discussion about, personal data, personal safety. And really, truly, when I looked you up, I mean, you guys were incredible. I emailed you. I said, I need one in the mail right away. One, I felt triggered. Number two, I had another podcast I showed your item on, and you guys like overnighted it to me, got it to me. And it was like the best customer service I've ever had, without question. You're like, you didn't even know who I was. And you graciously came onto the podcast. And I really want to applaud you for sharing this information, because there's a lot of spin-offs of stuff like this on the market. So let's talk a little bit about, what is on the market, specifically how the bag is unique and how we don't have to necessarily, go into all of how it's made, but kind of like you mentioned, the internal structure is really important. And I did look on Amazon, and I was quite startled, like how cheap you could find those things and how thin they looked. I was like, I wouldn't buy that. So let's talk a little bit about the Faraday bag, where it's at right now, and then how the average consumer can really be blessed by this technology.
Sure. When we built the bag, we didn't know how to build the bag. We never built one before, but the concept of a Faraday cage has been around for, over 100 years now. Michael Faraday, a physicist 100 years ago, he demonstrated that you can, have incredible amounts of electric static energy or electromagnetic energy coming towards you, but by sitting inside of a metal enclosure, you can protect yourself. So the concept of this has been around for a long time, and it's used quite heavily in the military to protect equipment, and it's also used quite heavily in scientific research to block out unwanted radio or electromagnetic waves that might interfere with your experimental work that you're doing. So it's a concept that's been around in other contexts, but not so much in privacy for most of the time. Last few years is when this whole issue has started coming up with privacy. And so when we set out to build it, we didn't have a good framework on how to do it, so we did a lot of testing. Now, there were a number of bags on the market that we found at that time, and we bought pretty much all the ones we could find. I mean, we bought a lot of bags. And, while there were a couple, other decent bags on the market, a vast majority of them had some serious problems. And when we looked into it, we would call up the seller of the bag, or we would call up the brand, the supposed brand of it, and we find out that most of them were just empty shells. They were products that were private labeled from China, and the person selling the bag that put their brand on it, they really had no idea how the bag was made. They didn't know whether it was tested properly or not. There was nothing there showing that they really had invested in the bag in any way. They were just selling something.
Right.
And we found that was a vast majority of the bags. Most of the bags we tested simply didn't work.
Yep.
They would work, but then they wouldn't work the next day because you happen to be in a different location and that sort of thing. And that's a result of not properly testing in a laboratory.
Yep.
So what we discovered was actually there was a lot of disturbing things we discovered. One of the things we discovered was that most of these places that are factories in China, they had started off making things like wallets and money belts, much like we did with our travel gear, making wallets and money belts that protected our credit cards. So they had the RFID protection in them. That technology is very simple to do. Blocking RFID is very simple because it's very low frequency, stuff that's used on our credit cards. It has a very short range.
Okay.
But when it comes to cell phones, where we're generally operating in the 2.4 gigahertz range, up in the microwave range frequency, it's much harder to build a bag that works. And these factories, they didn't really do any real research on how to do that, or they didn't test them in a proper laboratory. And so what they would do is they would make something up in the factory, put their phone in it, they would dial it, and if it didn't ring, well, it was good to go, and they would sell thousands of them under whatever brand somebody wanted to put on it. That's a bad way to do it. And I'll get to the testing that we did in a minute and explain why it's important. But the other main problem that we found with a lot of the bags, you'll see that ours is a roll top. And people sometimes say, well, why did you make a roll top? Well, we did it for two reasons. We wanted to make sure that the bag always worked regardless, even if it was upside down. You might think, well, why would you care if it's upside down? A lot of times people will take the bag and they'll throw it in their briefcase, or they'll throw it in their messenger bag or some other bag. They're carrying it with them. They're putting it in a glove compartment of their car. So you may not always be fully in control of the orientation of the bag. And what we discovered with, especially a lot of the cheap ones on Amazon, they're just a simple fold over flap. And if you turn the thing upside down, the weight of the tablet or phone falls down, and it presses against the fold over portion. Yeah. And it can separate the blocking material. The blocking material can come apart a little bit at that fold over because of the weight of the device. And it no longer would block. So you could turn it upside down and it stops blocking. You turn it right side up and it blocks again. That to us wasn't good enough. We wanted something that worked whether it was upside down or not.
So specifically, when I, people are just listening, when on the Faraday bag, when you actually have like two bands that come from the back over to the front, and it clasps around to the front so that it's fully closed and it has a really strong, secure closure on the top. So it rolls over and folds over so that all of its, all the material and everything is still contained really nicely and neatly so that there's no exposure in, out, and the phone doesn't fall out. So I think that's, it has a really nice, strong structure to it. So.
So that's why we did that. Those are the problems we found with other bags. They simply weren't tested, and they didn't work when they were tipped upside down. A lot of them didn't. But the testing is really important, and I just want to touch on that for a second if I can.
Yep.
When you if you were to just test it by putting your phone in the bag and dialing it, and then you don't get it or it doesn't ring, that tells you that the signal was blocked. But the problem is it only tells you that the signal was blocked for that cell phone in that location. If you go to a different location, maybe you walk a block away, you're oriented differently with all the cell phone towers in the area. You might be closer to a tower, you might be further, but the signal strength might be very different. And so when you're just doing your own home test, it only gives you one data point. It tells you one thing about that phone network and that location. When we take it into a laboratory, it goes into we send it to a third-party engineering company that tests electronics, and they put it in a special room where the entire room is blocked. And so the whole room is built with this blocking material all over the walls to make sure there are no outside signals. And they do that because then they can generate signals, and they know exactly the strength of all the signals they generate. So they can they can measure how well the bag performs over a complete spectrum of frequencies and strengths. So what we get back from them is an engineering report telling us how the bag will perform over a whole range rather than just one person's phone in one location. So it gives us the kind of information that we need to come out and tell our consumers and customers, hey, this bag we feel confident will block and do
You
this.
really are hitting it at all different levels and strengths to make sure that at every measure, when it's gone out in all these different exposures and atmospheres, that it's holding its value.
Mhm. Well, we certainly try, and I think it's one of the reasons why military and law enforcement trust the bag so much.
Yep.
As well as consumers. A lot of consumers trust the bag as well, of course.
Yeah, and it's, as far as testing, it's kind of like with our Evoke Beauty skincare line. We have a lot of food grade, natural, organic products, and that can be really dangerous because that could mean if it doesn't have the right preservatives, it will at some point be exposed and go rancid or have bacterial growth. And we spend a lot of money on certain machines with my chemist that will bake it 10 times over a 2-week period of time to make sure that whatever atmosphere it's in and whatever's going on in a home or what have you, that it will not go rancid or cause any issue. And so, a lot of kitchen making skincare lines, that's fine. You can use the same principles. But again, if you're not going to put the money behind the testing and the validation that you do for your clients, it would make me put the money down to buy this bag over another one, hands down. But a lot of that information isn't exposed, and a lot of clients don't, and or customers don't know how to search for that or to know to search for that. So that's a very valid point. So thank you for sharing that. As far as a regular person out there, I definitely I'm going to be getting these for clients and things of that nature that are interested. This is the phone unit. You do have an iPad, and you also have some more larger units that are for sale as well. Is that correct?
Yep, we have a tablet size one. We have actually quite a larger line of products in development. One of the other products that is available for this sort of a thing is, well, it's in development. I shouldn't say it's out of production yet. It's dry bags. It's interesting. It's another group that we hadn't really thought about, but preppers.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a lot of people out there, and especially nowadays, now that we're actually in a situation where everybody wished they'd been maybe more prepared.
Right.
All of a sudden, preppers, which was this fringe niche concept, is all of a sudden a household word. But Congress put out a study a few years ago about something called an EMP bomb. And it's a bomb that militaries around the world have developed that when it goes off in the atmosphere, it doesn't destroy any physical property in the sense of a blast or a fire or anything like that. It sends out a really strong pulse of electromagnetic energy that destroys electronics. So it destroys the electronic infrastructure of a country, but leaves everything intact. And it's a serious concern. So Congress put out a big study about it, and there's a bunch of guidelines for having to try and harden and prepare for those problems. So we've, preppers have really been on top of it, and we're working on a dry bag, 5 and 10 liter size dry bag that will also be fully Faraday bag protected. So you can put laptops, all sorts of things in there.
Awesome.
So that's on the way. Right now, the other products that we do have are more traditional wallet and money belt type products that come from our travel line.
Yep.
We're actually doing a fundraiser with those right now for the food bank.
Awesome.
We're giving away 100% of the proceeds from our money belt and our neck wallet to the food bank until, I don't know, probably for the next couple months at least. Anyways, for as long as this pandemic's going, we're not making anything off those two products. We're just donating it all. So
that's wonderful.
But for the Faraday type products like this, we have a number of other types of bags that are similar to the phone bags that will have straps and other sorts of uses. But it's probably going to be, it could be 8 months away still. This whole pandemic is really changing supply chain dynamics quite a bit. So it's really hard to predict when that'll get out of production.
Yeah,
testing
well,
now. So.
I think these basics are wonderful to have right now. I mean, this is the basics of what most people need. And, I told you we're going to make a beauty bag so that the ladies can protect their makeup and their cell phones and their iPads. So I'm pushing them on that, ladies. I'm going to make something pretty for you. But you'll have to help fund us with your design ideas. But no, I just think that this technology that you really have really looked at, every layer, and it's really, really incredible, on, the incredible job that you've done behind the story of where you started, the follow through of a true entrepreneur, following where the needs were in the market and fulfilling those needs, and now all the way down to the personal consumer, and then learn that there's so much more as far as really who you serve, the military. I mean, they, God bless you for protecting them and their information, as well as, criminals, journalists, and activists. Everybody in their own right and way deserves their privacy. Whether it's ethical or not, that's that person's truth that they live behind. So I just really, appreciate you for coming on the podcast and everything that you had to share. I think this is really enlightening, solid conversation, less about conspiracy theory and more about foundational science that has been around for a while, and something that everybody has access to. But it's so important to know who you're buying from. Just like there's thousands of private label CBD and skincare and hair care products, watered down. This guy, if you're buying this for intent to truly protect yourself and you're not protected, that is something that you definitely want to make sure that you do your research on. So, Todd, I just love it. I love your product. Really appreciate all the work that you've done with the Faraday bags, and go dark with Faraday. So,
Definitely.
Is there anything else that you want to share with us on the Awaken Beauty podcast today?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind actually. Just a little bit about privacy again, because it really is the whole discussion here. There are a lot of products on the market for privacy, but there's also a lot of fantastic organizations that are really trying to fight for our privacy. And I think if privacy is something we really care about, it's something we need to be active in fighting, because if you look at what happened after 9/11, we ended up with the Patriot Act that was supposed to, fight terrorism. But I think the consequences of the Patriot Act and the fact that we're still living with the Patriot Act, it's not gone, shows that sometimes the recourse can be worse. And we lost a lot of civil liberties with the Patriot Act, and they're not coming back. And now with this COVID, we're looking at Google and Apple creating these tracing and tracking software tools, and the governments around the world are really pushing for more and more surveillance. And they're using the pandemic as an excuse. And while there's certainly some good reasons for doing this, the real fear is that they haven't shown themselves to be trustworthy enough. And so, in other words, we can expect that these changes that they put in place, or these surveillance technologies that come in to help with the pandemic, are probably not going to go away. We're probably going to have them forever. And that's why it's important to not let them just crush our civil liberties in the pretext of a current crisis, because it never seems to be that these things go away when they should go away. They seem to be permanent, and then we just take it as the new normal.
Yep.
And we're slowly creeping towards a surveillance state, much like what China has.
Yep.
And I don't think any of us really want that. So
it's such a good point. It's such a good point, Todd. I mean, those that have the power to do so will creep in on personal liberty on high epidemic times like this. And you're right, it does create a new normal. And our new normal was pretty invasive before. And, you've got the news outlets saying, well, what can you tell people about their personal data being saved? Well, we're still thinking about it. Well, meaning they're thinking about it, they're already doing it. It's just like, we just don't want to alarm you that we're already doing it, and that we're just not going to tell you. So, again, there are things that we can do as consumers. Like I turn off my Google tracking on my maps. I turn off and erase cookies and tracking on my desktop. That's probably the very basic of so much more that I know I could do, but I don't have time to sit on YouTube and look at all the crazy people that are into this to do it for me. I need to hire, do it for you, dude. Maybe you're it. But we have the personal power. And this is a project that has been put out to us and an offer that we can take care of as far as a consumer. But we definitely have these other organizations and websites that we can learn about what's out there right now and how they're protecting us. So thank you so much for bringing that out. I'll put back to personal power.
You just made a very good point too about, and this, I should have actually mentioned this even earlier. It's a very good point you just made about, you don't have time to go down this rabbit hole of technology about what can I do to my phone to turn off tracking, to do this or that. Because every time we go down the path of trying to solve it with the technology that's causing the problem in the first place, it's a rabbit hole. And
yep.
we find, okay, well, we've plugged this hole, but now we learn the next day that there's this other problem with this other app or whatever. And that was the other reason why this bag or bags like this are so important, because most people will never be able to keep up with all of the things they need to do to be as private as they can with the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And it's confusing, right? For many people, well, most people, even security experts struggle to keep up and whatnot. But there's nothing simpler than a bag. Every single person out there understands the concept of put something in a bag, close it, that's it. There's no software upgrades to maintain, no patches, no security fixes. It's simple. And one thing that tends to happen is if you have to shut your phone, if you're going about your day and there's 3 or 4 data points you don't want part of your sort of profile in the cloud, we'll call it.
Right.
A good example would be maybe your church or a clinic you're going to, or maybe a divorce lawyer, or whatever the thing you're doing. Right? All this stuff becomes part of this, and it's permanently in your record of what you did.
Right.
So you might think, well, I'll just turn my phone off before I go here, or I'll turn it off before I go there. And then you find that in order to exercise privacy to the level that you want to exercise it, you tend to want to turn your phone off 8 to 10 times throughout your day as you go about your day.
Right.
And people simply won't do it. It's inconvenient. And so the fact of the matter is, if you have a bag or a device like this, you'll probably actually be more private because you'll take the step to do it because it's easy. If it's inconvenient, you won't do it. And so it actually increases your privacy because it's easy. Yeah. And I think that's something people need to realize.
Yeah, that's, let's take it home, personal consumer, your 3 examples right there, at least 2 of them are really valid. You're going to a divorce lawyer. Maybe you're in an abusive relationship. And I have had many women and their men are tracking their phones to a very dangerous degree, to the fact of I've made them take notes and put notes for me underneath their car seat so that if anything ever happened to them, I know where to go. That's a role that I played just as a health coach and a hairstylist. And the fact that they could use this, and when they're going certain places or what have you, to protect themselves from a dangerous relationship, or let's say you are going to a place for a treatment, and that's just whatever your reason is, that's really private data for you, who you're going to have service you. That's also a really valid point. So these are ways that people can think about, I really could get one of these just in case. So you can leave your phone on, you spit it in there, you close it up, you get where you're needing to go, do your thing, leave, open it back out if you need it, what have you. But, it's totally going to omit anything coming in and going out of the bag. So that's great, Todd. I really love that. That's a really great place to close on, as really brings it personal, how people can use it in their lives. So we talked about the future. I mean, you guys are really just kind of held up with production right now, and you guys will certainly get on my beauty bag in the near future. I'm going to keep hounding you on that. I'm going to giving you crap. And so, there's something I always ask my guests at the end of the show, and that is, what have you personally awakened to lately? It doesn't have to be this related, COVID related, anything related, just something personal for you that has awakened you in your life.
Something personal that has awakened me in my life. Sure. Well, years ago, I spent a lot of years in my early 30s. I shouldn't say years ago. I hate dating myself. Back in my early 30s, I was very much into Kung Fu. I practiced it on a regular basis. And since then, I don't know, I got into business, got out of shape. I just did all the wrong things. And this, like a lot of people with this pandemic, being quarantined at home, you find new things to do. And
Right.
I guess I've really been reawakened to that. I started taking an online Tai Chi course through YouTube just every day. And so now every day I'm doing Tai Chi, and it's just brought back a lot of old memories, and it's
I love
reminding
that.
me of how good it feels to do something meditative and to do something for myself rather than just busting my ass for my business every day. So
Yeah.
that's what I've awakened to.
I just love that. And I can say ditto, ditto, ditto. Like this little fear will kind of creep in. I was thinking of it yesterday was I'm getting outside and I'm loving it because I'm really a nature person. And I was thinking, oh my God, this fear is coming up in me. And I had to like shift the energy of like, well, what is it going to be like when I have to go back to the grind of what was?
Right.
And so we really have to be mindful. How are we recreating ourselves right now and how we want to reestablish our life and our boundaries? And, this is certainly what you have created is certainly a boundary piece, but how do we then take that at a personal level and say, how am I protecting myself and my personal livelihood of truly living life? So that's great. Thank you for sharing. Well, Todd, you are a joy. I just had so much fun getting to know you over the last week. And thanks for pulling together your camera and your mic and everything for today's interview. Everybody on iTunes, make sure you go and like and subscribe this podcast because this really affects everybody. And leave there your key takeaway. What hit you today on today's podcast? What awakened you and your aha moment? And Todd, thank you again for being with us. And everybody on, just so you know, you can, the website, Todd, is
GoDarkBags.com.
GoDarkBags.com. And for right now, until the end of April, we are offering a 20% off. And the code for that is going to be Awaken Beauty. Now, if you're listening to this after the fact, you can still receive the discount for 10% off the GoDark bags. And that is going to be Awaken Faraday for that code. And we'll make sure that we have that on future podcasts as well to go ahead and support Todd and his ventures because it's so important as far as personal security. So thank you, Todd. Thank you for everybody on the listening to the Awaken Beauty podcast. And until next time, stay sane, get sleep, and bring your sexy back.